Hey everybody, this is Minda Hartz. I'm your host of Secure the Seat Live, your weekly show here on LinkedIn Live. But if you're watching us on YouTube or Twitter, we're happy that you're here with us because I know one thing that's true, you can be anywhere on the internet right now and you're here with us. So we're really, really excited to have you. If you are joining us for the very first time, you're in for a treat. Please connect with us and chat, use the chat function. We want to make sure that you're feeling just as connected to this show as we are in the interview. And happy Women's History Month. In the chat, I would love to know who are some women, say their names that you just admire, that you pray for, that you support, that you think of. Let's say their names because oftentimes we don't get to see the women's names that look like us. And so it's Women's History Month. We're celebrating all women. You are dope. Don't forget that. Make sure that let's say some names in the chat. You can say that throughout. But today's show is really special to me. It's important. I'm actually a new friend of mine, Sharice Johnson. She is an author, a consultant, a speaker, so many amazing things. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself. But before I bring her to the stage, I also want to dedicate this episode to a mutual friend that me and Sharice had, and her name is Deidre Jackson Jones, and she passed away in 2017. And me and Sharice did not know each other at the time, but another mutual friend, Ayana, brought us together. And I just want to dedicate this episode to our good friend Deidre because she was such a jewel, such a gem, and she was somebody that I put in my acknowledgments in my first book, The Memo, because she had such a profound effect on me when I was moving through my life as a young woman, and I will never, ever forget her. And so without further ado, I want to bring Sharice to the stage and let's get into the conversation. Hey girl, hey.
Hey. It's a blessing to be here. Thank you so much, Minda, for having me. And I so appreciate the dedication to Dee, who is just a wonderful, wonderful spirit, also impactful in my life, and a wealthy girl in its finest moment.
Finest moment. Sharice, for those who may not know about your work, tell them a little bit more about you. And you have a new book out, and we'll drop the links because I'm not going to have to convince everybody that they're going to need your book when we're done.
Awesome. Yes. And so, as you mentioned, I am the original wealthy girl. I like to start off and also just saying, I am a wealthy girl. I hail from, that's right, big ups. I hail from Strong Island outside of New York and spent a lot of my earlier career in financial services. I worked as a stock picker for many years with JP Morgan. And as I thought about the ways in which wealth is created, it wasn't just about public markets, it was about private markets as well. So I moved to Chicago in 2008 for business school, started my own financial technology company around personal finance. And then through that experience, I closed it and decided to work more at the systems level around entrepreneurship. And so in my day job right now, I'm a managing partner at Next Street. We work at the intersection between entrepreneurship and capital and finance, but also just came out with this new book called A Wealthy Girl, 7 Steps to Prosperity, Peace, and Personal Power. Over the last 6 years, that sits under my ShariceSays.com platform, where I talk all things about wealth and how to live your best life.
That's what I'm talking about. So thank you for sharing that. We've dropped Sharice's link and her book link because we need to get that because we want to live our most wealthiest life. So before we jump into the heart of the conversation, if you're watching us today, make sure you drop those questions in because if you want to be a wealthy person, a wealthy girl, man, them, they, drop the questions in the chat because we want to make sure you get what you need. But Sharice, let's level set a bit because I don't know about you, but when I grew up and I heard about wealth, I had all these ideas about what wealth was. But what's your definition of wealth and what are the misconceptions around being wealthy?
Absolutely. And so I believe wholeheartedly that wealth is more than the dollars and cents that sit in our bank account. it involves so many of the things that make us unique. And so that involves our intangible assets, such as our faith, our relationships, our family, the unique attributes that make us who we are and that allow us to bring our gifts into the world. And so when you combine those intangible assets with the real tangible ones, such as, your net assets, your financial stocks, your business, minus your debt, you have this expansive view of wealth. And I think we are destined to think differently and reframe that wealth conversation so that we have that expansive view. I think some of the misconceptions that people have about wealth, one is that it only sits in that bucket of financial assets, which is one of the reasons why I believe strongly that wealth is, yes, the prosperity that which comes from that, but it's also, how can we have the peace? How can we have the personal power? Because we can have all the money in the world. That's not going to give us that peace. That's not going to give us that personal power. And that's I want people to strive for. The other misconception is that wealth is only reserved for white people. And I don't think that that is the case. Bell Hooks, reminds us in her book, Ain't I a Woman, that we shouldn't chase white patriarchal standards that never really had us in mind in the first place. And so I want us to feel, that one, we can have some of those traditional elements of wealth. We need to hack the systems that are rooted in racism, but also we need to have other standards and definitions to define us and what we bring. And that gets to that definition of wealth. Another major misconception that people have is I don't have the skill set to build wealth in both forms. And I want to bust that myth wide open because you can build and learn how to build wealth for yourself, but also how to create that not just for yourself, but for the generations around you. And I would say last, one of my biggest misconceptions that I see from women and the thousands of women that I talked to over the years is that wealth is an individual pursuit. It's not. We only get wealthy, just how we're here today, talking about, our respective purposes, right? We get wealth by the collective power of who we bring along with us and how we fine tune each other. Iron sharpens iron, and we need to have that collective power to build wealth, particularly as women in this first day of Women's History Month, but also as women of color.
That part, Sharice, you were dropping so many gems. I had to grab my tambourine because we do have all of these standards of what wealth is. And oftentimes we do think it's reserved for white people only. And there's so much that we can do together. And listen, if just that little bit of Sam's Club sample taste didn't make you like holler and scream in your seat right now, we're dropping the link to Sharice's book so that you can be wealthy in so many other areas of your life. And something that you said, it brings me to another question, which is you mentioned some of those intangible wealthy things that are in our life, like peace, for example. Can you explain what you mean by, because we often think it's always money, right? It's wealth is only money.
Absolutely. So one of the big intangible assets that I want to bring up, which has been meaningful for me personally, but I think other people can relate wherever you sit, and that is faith. And faith is, the evidence of things hoped for and things unseen. And wherever you fall in your religious spectrum, the more secular, perhaps more worldly view is hope. And my faith is a direct result of the women. I see a lot of the women's names mentioned in the comments, but my faith is a direct result of my grandmother's faith. My grandmother was a migrant from South Carolina to New York City, and my other grandmother on my paternal side was a migrant from Alabama to New York City in the 1940s and early 50s. And it was their faith. They didn't have a lot of the monetary wealth, but their faith in that life had to be better in the North so that they can get the jobs that they sought after and raise the family that they wanted to raise and be the women that God purposed them to be. I believe wholeheartedly that developing a faith muscle is like, a lot of women, and myself included, like to work out. And, you're in there every day trying to build and trying to get those muscles right and trying to stay trim and trying to really stay healthy. Faith is a little bit like that. It takes time to prune, it takes time to grow. And having faith is about believing in something that you can't see today, particularly when the struggles come. The struggles come on the job, they come outside of the job, but it's my faith that holds me together. I'm Christian and I'm proudly Christian, and I take that faith from a Christian lens, but again, it's available to all in kind of where you sit, and allowing you to support and be supported by those around you, and for allowing you to relinquish control. Faith is about also knowing that you're not in this alone and that there are other people there to support your dreams, the wildest ones that you have, and believing in a power, really above yourself.
Absolutely. I just love that. And I think even in this time period where many of us are experiencing, a syndemic, multiple pandemics at once. And, sometimes if a certain pandemic in your life, let's say your money isn't, as we used to say, is acting kind of funny, then you're going to need to find those other wealth pockets, like your family and your loved ones, or, your work, or something like that. So I really love that you were talking about these ways outside of just money, right? Money is helpful, but it's not everything. So thank you for that, Charisse. We're taking questions. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Another question that I wanted to ask you is, one of the things that you talk about is the importance of starting and supporting entrepreneurs and small business owners. And since you and I both are business owners, how do you suggest we do that, help each other, and why is that so important?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I want to root everybody in some data. And in this country, there are just over 30 million small businesses. And of those, 80% are sole proprietors. And what that means is that there are a lot of people trying to be out here making it, having the financial freedom, but also the independence and creativity that comes with owning a small business. And the reason why it matters is because small businesses are responsible for over half of the private sector jobs in this country. So when we talk about economic empowerment and we talk about, having what you need to sustain not just yourself and your family, having a job is important, right? Having the income that comes with that is important. But also when you have a household that has an entrepreneur, the net worth, and this is the tangible net worth, is 5 times the amount than households with just an employee. And so what that means is also, if we're going to pass down the wealth to the next generation, which I argue we have to do, why? In order to pursue our dreams, in order to make the changes that we need to see and that we want to innovate in this world to solve big problems, we need the actual financial capital to do so. And entrepreneurship and small business is one way to get that. And so in building small businesses, we give other people opportunity, but we also get to innovate. And that's just super important to the fabric of this country. And I would argue that supporting these businesses and supporting, folks like you and myself keeps that cycle going. Entrepreneurship, you need to figure out what that means for you. It's for sure a mindset. And there are different types of small businesses and entrepreneurs that you can become. You don't have to always run the business. You could, be a worker in the business. You could own shares and have other people run the business. The important thing is that mindset is developed and you understand how important it is to the fabric of our communities. Because particularly as women and particularly as business owners of color, when we do own businesses, we cycle that money back into community more than our male counterparts and then our white counterparts. And that's just super important if we're actually going to have the power to make change and to, again, re-envision and reimagine a world that supplies the goods and services that we want, that we need, that solve, again, real problems.
Yes, yes. I'm feeling like we're in church. I see so many amens coming through the various platforms that are coming in. And, one of the questions that I see here in the chat, Charisse, is what does it mean to create generational wealth? And that's a great question because I think we hear it a lot, but you may not understand exactly what that might mean. So I'll pass that to you.
Absolutely. I think first we have to understand what that wealth construct means for us. And so if we define wealth in the way that I'm arguing that we should in the expansive view, your tangible and intangible assets, then intergenerational wealth means passing those assets, both the tangible and intangible, on to the next generation. So my daughter, for instance, who's 22 months old, will receive the benefit and inherit those assets. The money, for sure, that I'm building up for her, but also the education, that same love, that same relationships, and knowing how to navigate to have and be able to pursue her dreams and be able to push forward the communities that are in her circle. And so, one of the biggest, for instance, challenges that entrepreneurs have is that family and friends capital that allows them to launch businesses. And so when we are able to build generational wealth, for instance, we're able to allow, for instance, that next generation of entrepreneurs to start business easier than perhaps we were. I know it was a challenge for me in my own business when I wanted to go to people to help, finance and help raise money. It was a challenge. And so that generational wealth is the passage of those assets down, not again, also perhaps to the generation right under you, but then the generation after that. And therefore the legacy lives on. And so we want to be able to recount what it means to live into the assets that we have.
Absolutely. That it's such a word. And I'm so glad that the person that asked that question asked it, because I think we can look at it in a lot of different ways, right? One of the things that I did in 2018 was I was thinking about my legacy, but not just in terms of wealth, but also keeping names alive, right? And I don't have any children, but I wanted to make sure that I created a scholarship at one of my universities so that my name, well, not necessarily my name, but the heart's name, my mother's name lives on, and creating a scholarship for first generation and transfer student women of color so that they know that not the only donors aren't white. There are Black women out here funding these opportunities too. And so that was really important for me to do when I think about just wealth, and hopefully being able to invest in that next generation will allow them to do the same as well.
Absolutely. And if I could just piggyback off of that for a second, because I think it's important to just bring that story of how do we document, how do we, put a structure around, having others see the importance of, what you were doing with your family and, what, other people want to do with entrepreneurs. I take it back to even my own upbringing. And this is just an example of, for instance, what I call a wealthy experiment. A wealthy experiment is a way for you to embrace the art of learning, growing, and teaching and failing. And all in pursuit of a wealthy goal that you have. And then when we talk about intergenerational wealth, there are wealthy experiments that you can run with the next generation, right? When I was younger, my parents exposed my brother and I to, going on trips. And I would call one of the trips that we went on to was Vermont. Lily White, they got the opportunity to take us there, and we saw like huge houses, lots of opportunity that folks that didn't look like us, and that left a lasting impression. Like how could I now, expose my kid to, different environments that allow them to get a different perspective on how people are living, but also, pour into my wealth. And that is what we mean in carrying on the legacy for that next generation behind us.
I love that so much. I'm going to ask one last question before I jump into our bonus questions. But if you have another question for Charisse, please drop it in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Let's talk about the new book, okay? A Wealthy Girl. You talk about the 7 steps to live a wealthy life. Can you share just a few of those? I know you've dropped some today, but can you just share a couple of steps with our audience today?
Sure. I'll share 3 steps that I think are good for this crowd. One of the steps is about working your craft, and I know Minda, you would believe in this one wholeheartedly because it's about fine tuning the skill set and that thing that you do extremely well. For me, it was investing, and I talk about the 10,000 hours. And I know we've heard, that quoted, for instance, from Malcolm Gladwell, and what it takes to be good, and not just good, but excel in your craft. I spent over 10,000 hours learning how to be an investor in the stock market. And I think if we're going to fulfill those things that we're uniquely set out to do, it takes work and it takes effort. And it takes owning that thing and refining it, surrounding yourselves with the mentors and sponsors necessary to propel you forward. One of the other steps that I think is really important, which I'm sure this crowd could appreciate, is developing an investor mindset. It's about owning yourself as the CEO of your wealth. No one can do that but you. If you don't run a business, well, now's your chance to be CEO. Like, you're in charge of the vision, and you're in charge of getting, again, the help around you. I'm a big fan of getting the assists. There's nothing wrong with assists. Surrounding yourself with the right financial advisors, surrounding yourself, it's tax time, with the right, taxes, make sure you keep that money. And also, having that investor mindset means that you take action. I have a very specific philosophy around how to set up your infrastructure for putting aside money to save, invest, pay down that debt, and protect yourself. Insurance, it matters. So that strategy is called SIPN: save, invest, pay down, and protect. And then live your life. I'm a big fan of living your life and having the ability to do so in its fullness. And then finally, the part of that investor mindset is making sure that you have the confidence, because investing is mainly about confidence and building that muscle over time. And the last step that I want to share, particularly, again, in honoring the first day of Women's Month, is being a girl. I can't tell you how beautiful it is to be a female in whatever way that you define it. I'm cisgender female, and you might consider yourself, gender nonconforming, transgender, whatever it is, how you define girl for yourself. Being a girl is a mindset. And it takes us to the power of the collective that I talked about in terms of one of the misconceptions earlier, that wealth is an individual. Well, when we are women and we are girls, we take charge of the power of the collective and move forward the people, the ideas, the wealth dreams of others, whether it's getting into wealthy circles and talking about how do I move this other person forward, that if they do well, we do well as a collective, right? It's pooling our money so that we can invest together, not as an individual, but together. There's power in group financing to get to what you want. And then lastly, I'll say about being a girl that if you are a guy, and we welcome you and I welcome you, because that mindset of being a girl is universal. Men and women alike need to know and understand what that is, because we need men as allies. God knows, my husband is one of my biggest allies, along with my dad and my brother. And men are so important to this work. I know you feel that way. I mean, I met your brother, briefly. And so that step of being a girl and harnessing the power of the collective is so critical to building that wealthy life. So those are the 3 steps that I'll leave this crowd with.
So good. Listen, we dropped the links inside of the chat. Make sure that you go and get the book. We're going to move into our bonus questions really quick, because for those who know and shine with us every Monday, I love grits, Charisse. I'm a lover of grits and rap lyrics. And not to be confused, I do not use sugar. But so I'll ask, Charisse, I'm scared to ask. I'm always people I really appreciate and enjoy. I'm always afraid to find out how they like their grits. So I'll ask you, how do you like your grits and what's your favorite rap lyric and why?
First of all, I love the question, right? And I love just, I mean, I love grits. Like I said, my grandparents are from the South, so we ate grits a lot. I like my grits with cheese, a little bit of garlic salt, and some pepper. And depending on the day and how I'm feeling, I have some salmon on the side. You know, fish and grits will always work well. And so, as it relates to the rap lyrics, this one, you know, I had to think about like which one am I gonna pull out? Because you know I'm from New York, and so there's lots of choices there. But I'll narrow it down to you know I'll take it back, and this for me is in honor of someone who cared so deeply, who actually passed away this weekend of mine. My one of my coaches, my basketball coach, but he was so much more than a coach. He was a sponsor for who I was, and so when I think about this song, I think about the '90s when I was in getting ready to go to high school. It's from Salt and Pepper. Shoot. You know, it goes, you know, here I go, here I go, here I go again. Girls, what's your weakness, men? Chilling, minding my business, you know. And for those who know the song, you know, it goes on and on. The reason why I chose that song is because it's all about, you know, female empowerment and also going after the things that we want, not just in the professional sense, but also outside of work, which if we do that well, work goes well. And so this one is about, you know, getting that man and you know, understanding like how important it is for the love in your life and not being ashamed of that. You know, a lot of times, you know, we might put that on a hush, like, you know, I don't want that, or I'm not going to be vocal about that. But you know, like for instance, I met my husband on Match.com, and I'm best $39.99 investment I ever made. And so, being able to claim who you want and what you want, I think, is so important.
Listen, Cherie, somebody needed to hear that today on Women's History Month. Don't be afraid to invest in every area of your life if that's what you want to do. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we are multifaceted. You know, we can have a career, we can have love, we can have all the things that we want if that's what we want to do, right? But we have to go and get it and keep minding your business, figure out what your business is and what you want. So I love that. And the other question I want to ask you is, you know, all of those watching today and will watch the replay later, everybody's a leader. You don't have to have a title to lead starting right now. What is one piece of advice you would give all of our leaders on how to make the workplace better than they found it?
Absolutely. And so it's such an important question. I think for all of us as leaders, and not just in this moment in time, but this moment in time adds up to where we will take our country and really this world. And one piece of advice I would give is to embrace and agitate for anti-racism right now. We cannot move forward as a country, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot, unless we understand the ways in which racial prejudice, but also the misuse of power by our dominant culture here in this country, which is, you know, white America, is needed to change. And in the workplace, unless we agitate, unless we speak up for the things that we want and demand that our institutions reckon with how racism shows up in the daily microaggressions, but also in the bigger ways and how we are hired, how we're promoted, we're not going to move forward. And I think if we can do our individual parts to show up in that way and demand that from the people around us as leaders, we will leave ourselves off in a better place.
Yes, I love that answer so much. And I love that you said resist, resist. I know Frederick Douglass, that was one of his big pieces is resist, resist, resist. And that's part of who we show up in the world as right now, you know. And I think that it's okay to resist. You need to figure out what that might look like for you, because as women, we deserve that. We deserve to be able to center ourselves. We deserve to be able to be wealthy in all the areas that Sharice talks about. We have time for one last question, Sharice, that I'm pulling from the chat. And that's, I see, Mike, can you pop one on the screen for us? Yeah. Sharice, really appreciate the advice. What do you do when you don't have a supporting family and you live in a monocultural and conservative country? So you are more of an explorer than a trailblazer.
Yeah, important question. I would say when the supporting family isn't there or you feel alone, your family can be what you make it. It doesn't have to be related to you by blood. And I would say find the allies that can journey with you that might not be in your initial blood given family. That can lift you up, that can help you go side by side with obtaining the wealth that you want to obtain, but also to keep encouraging you because that becomes then your new family. And I want to encourage everyone to find that when that might not be the innate family that you were kind of born with in this world.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for asking, because the reality is not everybody has the same support system. But we all can, as Sharice said, there is chosen family. I am blessed to have a really good family, but there's people who I've met over my life that I say they're my chosen family. They're like my brothers and sisters because we just connect on a very soul level. And I appreciate those people in my life. But I also want to shout out my brother because we work together. One of my brothers, actually two of my brothers, but one is behind the scenes. And so, it's nice when you do have that support system. Sharice, we're going to drop your book and your links inside of the chat. Please make sure that you support. I'm also going to, I'm going to ask Sharice if she'd be interested. I'm going to gift 3 copies of your book, and maybe I can twist your arm a bit to sign them. So listen, if you send an email, the first 3 people to my inbox, minda@mindahearts.com, put Sharice's name in the title. The first 3 that hit my inbox when I get off the show, you're gonna get a gift of this book. And I hope that you will pay it forward in Women's History Month and buy the book and give it to not just to yourself, but to somebody else. But Sharice, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything that you just want to say that we haven't said yet?
I just want to say I'm grateful for you, Minda, for creating a platform to have honest and candid conversations because in doing so, you spread the wealth forward and you allow people to have honest conversation. And as you have your upcoming book coming out about racial trauma and for all of the ways in which we can work collectively, I just want to urge people, let's work collectively to push forward the dreams and aspirations, but also we're trying to actually make change in this country, but also broader than that in this world. And so I just want to say a note of gratitude.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody in the chat who showed up, who showed out, who's saying all the yeses, and thank you for those who've said my name in the chat. So if you are one of 3, if you go to, we won't put my email address inside the chat box, but if you catch it, minda@mindahearts.com, the first 3 in my inbox with the title Sharice, and you will get a copy of her new book. But again, we'll drop it in the chat so that you can go ahead and get it for yourself. You know what? I just want to say thank you. Happy Women's History Month. It's, women's history is American history. Black history is American history. So don't let people try to silence us any other month of the year. We're holding on to this. We're finding our ways to be wealthy. I just want to thank you, Sharice, for your time, for the way that you show up for all of us. We'll see you next week, and we hope that you all will keep securing your seat. Have a great rest of your week.